Hi, my name is Christina Haswood. Yat HK Dosha na Christina Haswood Yinishe. Toda cheat nishla, the Bethlehem Bashash Teen Ashatabaha, Dasha Cheki Aniashnella. Hello, my name is Christina Haswood. I'm Bitterwater born for the Black Sheep people. My maternal grandparents of the Zuni Edgewater and my paternal grandparents of the Towering House people. That's who I am as a young Navajo woman. I'm also Representative Christina Haswood of Kansas House District 10, which is the southeast of Douglas County, Lawrence, Kansas, all the way down to Baldwin City. It's my first year as a state legislature, and I'm so excited to be here. I serve on the committees of Water, Health and Human Services, Agriculture, and State and Federal Relations. Um, it's an extreme honor to be here today. American Indian College Fund helped my academic journey um, to not only when I was a tribal college student at Haskell Indian Nations University, but it also helped invest in my future when I transferred to Arizona State University, and then when I finally obtained my master's in public health at the University of Kansas Medical Center, which I graduated just last year. But also, what happened last year is that I was asked to run for office. So I guess that's how I got here today.
Thank you so much. Could you share a little bit about how your educational journey maybe brought you to the Kansas legislature?
So, my higher education journey includes going to Haskell. At first, I was undecided. My major declared was undecided, and I thought I wanted to go into nursing. I was inspired in high school of observing surgery, and I thought being a surgeon or a surgical nurse was more of my realm. Just because observing surgery, a lot of people don't have the stomach for it, and us Diné Navajo people, we butcher sheep. So I was pretty comfortable and used to the dissections during anatomy, and I thought that I would be perfect for that role. But going through higher education and learning that I did not enjoy my time memorizing muscles, bones, and all that was just a total disaster for me. And I was like, telling myself, if I'm not having fun memorizing and learning the anatomy and physiology, how in the world am I going to make this into a career for the rest of my life? So I was like, okay, I need to figure out a whole new path. So we started to look at public health and community health. So at Haskell, luckily they have an Associates of Science in Community Health. I really enjoy just that bread and butter of teaching through our cultural ways how to live healthy, how to be a healthy person. And it was interesting because in the health field, we have this thing called holistic health, which is actually what us indigenous folks have been doing for centuries before, the beginning of time. And it's instilled in our cultural values. Speaking from a Navajo perspective, like running in the morning before the sun comes up, harvesting and having sheep and cattle, and just those lifestyles that are tied to our culture, even with our ceremonies that we've done, that all helps heal like your mental, physical, spiritual, and environmental health. And really having that moment that clicked for me, I was like, okay, I guess the whole world, our Western education is not in tune with this holistic health, and we are. But also seeing, okay, so we have all this in our culture, but we still have health issues such as obesity, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, high blood pressure, and that list keeps growing and growing. And it wasn't really a huge realization until I was at Haskell in my American Indian Diabetes course. There's about 20 of us in the classroom, and the instructor asked, how many of you have or have known someone who was impacted by diabetes? And the entire class raised their hand. And I remember, like most of my grandparents and my aunties, they have diabetes. And I thought it was just kind of like my family thing. And that was another light bulb that clicked for me, that the health issues I'm facing here in the urban area are the same health issues that they're facing on the reservation area. And it didn't really add up to me, and it kind of angered me that, I'm here living in Kansas, supposed to be a better life, but still we're still seeing some of these similar health issues, and why is that happening? And then really diving into the policy and history of our relationship with the federal government, tribal sovereignty, and that not really correlating to us here who live on the urban sides that live off our reservation, and then even those who go to college, they're off the reservation too. So that's where my mind was kind of thinking of. I transferred to Arizona State University in 2015. Started in the spring of 2015. I only knew one person, and that was my uncle, and he was an engineer. And other than that, I pretty much packed like 3 bags and said bye to Kansas and hello to ASU. It was a great move because that's where I really started to pick up public health and the research side of things. But also, I was closer to my family on the reservation. And I also had the opportunity to work with our internship with my tribe in the epidemiology center, do an internship at Diné College, another TCU, and to really understand us Southwesterns, how our like originally our land and why our water issue is such a big thing, and how do we work collaboratively with other tribes, because over there they have about 22, 21, 23 tribes, and then in Kansas we only have 4. So learning that dynamic was really helpful. Unfortunately, that first semester I did end up failing, and I'm pretty transparent about this because at Haskell I graduated with like a 3.6 GPA, cum laude, got like a little certificate and everything, and I was like feeling so confident in myself that I was just gonna kill it at ASU. But little did I know that the pace of things really changed, and I felt like, you know, I feel like no one really told me, and I feel like this is improving throughout our TCUs to really prepare for that exchange. But back in the day, I just was totally cultural shocked. I finished my first semester at ASU with a 1.21 GPA. It's so traumatic that I still remember the GPA. And then I was put on academic probation. And this was a point in my life where I was like crying to my parents and saying like, I want to come home. I'm going to go back to Haskell. And they're like, no, you stay out there. You're the one that wanted to leave. So you better finish what you started. So, Native parents. And so I was like, okay, I'll tough it out. And then luckily that was the summer that I interned at Diné College, learned public health through the Navajo logic model, which really made sense to me as a young Navajo woman, and really solidifying that public health and my cultural traditions really go hand in hand, and how much we really need to be there, especially in the epidemiology and research side, where we really need to decolonize our research methods and data, and really be the researchers who help our community, not having outsiders come and, risk the unethical manners of science. So those are just really things that really fired me up. After that, transferred to the University of Kansas Medical Center in 2018. Did 2 years, got my master's in public health last year, got asked to run for office last year, and then that's how that started.
I want to touch on what you're bringing from your master's in public health to your work now in the legislature. You could speak a little bit about graduate school too, as a piece of that, if you thought that was important.
I think a lot of this started when I failed my first semester and I could never recover from that GPA loss. I think a lot of us feel that because even just trying to get up to that 3.0, and taking some of the classes I really struggled in, I failed anatomy and physiology 1 and 2 collectively 6 times, where ASU has a great program with their community colleges. I had to take that at like Rio Salado, our Maricopa Community College. The ASU course was a little too tough for me and just really didn't fit my learning style. So once I knew I was kind of in an academic hole, I was like, all right, internships, like experience. This is somewhere I feel like I can really thrive in. Just really coming to terms that I'm not academically strong, which did really hinder, I believe, my scholarship abilities. And that's why I really appreciated scholarships who took the time to read my essay and to read my story of resiliency. And there was a lot of great opportunities too during the summer as well, where people are taking their break, and some of us kind of just have to chug through the summer semesters as well. And with that, I did like 10 internships during my undergrad. So because it took me about, let's see, I think 5 or 6 years to finish undergrad. And with that, I was just gaining experience. And public health is definitely all about research and writing papers and collecting data. But I was really frustrated that that was kind of where things stopped in public health as a researcher. You write the paper or you submit the grant, get a program, but there's always issues that are kind of out of your reach as a researcher. So like policy, like raising the age of tobacco to 21 years old, blood alcohol limits, policy level that our laws and statutes are enforced. I really did not see that in the classroom. In undergrad and grad school, I only had one courses of public health law and policy, and those are the courses I was just craving for more. I was like, I want to learn more, and it was like, okay, you either go to law school or try and get yourself an internship with someone like in those positions. And I interned like at the state level at my tribal nation, Indian Health Services headquarters. Was a federal agency for me. I really didn't think so because there's so many limitations. But so I felt like there was just this curiosity that kind of drove me through my academic career. And really, when I got to grad school and I started to take that public health law and policy a little bit more serious, I took that extra step in our homework assignment. So I remember one of it was like, who's your state representative? And it was just kind of like a blackboard thing. I think you just type in and fill in. I was like, I wonder who it is, and I wonder what she's up to. So I like followed her Facebook, her Twitter, and I kind of looked at what bill she sponsored, what committee she was on. Of course, at the time, I had no idea what any of this mean because the state legislator websites, I think for all states, because I've seen others too, it's just so confusing, a little bland. And so I was just like, I don't know what I'm looking at, but I think I like what I'm seeing. And so I actually followed her Facebook, saw that she was doing an event in town, went to that event in town, and that event was like at a Saturday morning at like 9 a.m. at a coffee shop. And that's when I really kind of just started to throw myself into state politics, and really meeting the politician, because I think we kind of grow up knowing that politicians are not the greatest of people. Politicians are not to be trusted, and they do things more for their personal gain than for the community. And that's kind of the environment I always grew up in, that politicians weren't really there to help us, especially as Indigenous peoples, especially with our tribal nations. So I really wanted to see, was this true? And to my surprise, my state rep was amazing. She was so kind, but again, she didn't know, like the tribal issues that were happening. And I think Lawrence is one of the highest population urban Native American people. We have KU and Haskell, and a lot of people just kind of settle down here. So that was another frustration, that was a light bulb, that every time I talked to someone in an elected position, even in Congress too, when I did some internships in DC, they wouldn't really know what the issues were. And oftentimes you have to start back all the way to 1492. You have to give a history lesson. And like when you're talking to a congressional staffer, you have like 30 minutes tops, 15 minutes. And so spending that much time saying like, okay, the settlers came over to the United States, or before the United States, because there's Indigenous folks. And then we still see in current events and policies that people forget that there were Indigenous people here. So really trying to say, okay, we're here today. We have our tribal sovereignty. What are you doing to uphold the treaties and land trusts and saving, ensuring that our environment and our planet's going to be here for future generations? I feel like these conversations just aren't there. And why are they not there? Because we're not at the table. We're not in that room making or helping the policies. We're not there being the staffers. We're not there being the elected official. And that was probably the one thing I never thought of, because I was like, at the end of the day, when I graduate, I want to be the political advisor for Indian country. I never thought that I should be the politician. So really seeing that there was a need of representation, I think really drove me as well. We have here in Kansas Representative Dr. Pankwi Victors. She's been here for 10 years, and she was the one that really encouraged me, especially when she introduced her Missing More Indigenous Peoples bill. I was there in 2020, seeing her do a press release, and fast forward now to 2021, as me as a state legislator, I helped her pass that piece of legislation. So it's really great to see, we need more of us in these elected official positions, and how much influence and awareness that we can do for our communities.
So I was hoping you could speak a bit more about how your experience helped shape your connection to your culture and your journey and who you are now as a Native woman.
I feel like a lot of us urban Native kids kind of grew up with the struggle of we're not at our homelands, we're not as accessible to go see our family as often as we would like. And for me personally, and I've heard this too, at my time at ASU, for those who grew up in Phoenix and Mesa area and Chandler, it was trying to fit in. It was trying to accept being an indigenous person and use and being comfortable with your culture, being comfortable with your skin and not fitting the beauty standards. That was me K through 12, and I really didn't break out of that shell until around high school, where I did a pageant, a Native American pageant, and I think that is one of the things I definitely encourage. And that really helped build my confidence of who I am as an Indigenous woman. I'm so lucky that I went to a high school that had a Native American club, just because we have a large urban population here. And I think I was the president one year, and I grew up with like powwows. So I grew up with other tribal um, people in my community, not just only being Navajo. So really embracing that and not being ashamed of that was probably my first step. And at Haskell, it was really great to be among my own people. Down to the way we pray, down to celebrating cultures and cultural foods, to taking American Indian studies classes. I think it's now Indigenous studies. And taking my first class there, and learning all the history of what happened to us in the genocide, and especially at Haskell, what happened at Haskell. Haskell was previously a boarding school, and knowing that my freshman girls' dorm was a hospital at the time, so just really understanding like what happened to us and understanding that that wasn't that long ago. It was probably less than 200 years ago, and that learning all that like at 18, 19 definitely angered me. And I felt like I see also with young native folks too, is that we get angry at what happened, and we just kind of don't really know our abilities and our voices of change. I think we do a great job at activism, being organizing protests, and defending that way. But I also feel like there's this side of policy and politics that maybe well, it is extremely intimidating, and I'd like to encourage more Native folks to get involved. But that's really finding my voice there. And at Haskell, I kind of made it a point because I grew up being the shy girl. And at Haskell, I was like, okay, I'm not going to be her anymore. I want to be who I always think is cool, like a leader, a very outgoing individual. So the first thing I did was I ran for my dorm president, and I made it a point to say hello to every girl there in the hallways, even going to our little shower caddies, going to our shared shower area, just saying hi. And saying hi to somebody too, just like randomly that you don't know, can really make somebody's day and make them seen. So doing that, and then I also ran for a sophomore representative in our student senate, and got to help lead a project of addressing bullying. And there was actually a incident during my time there where a Native student felt that they were being bullied by students and faculty for not looking Native enough. And I think this is an issue that we still face today. And really trying to bring that awareness and to say, okay, you might think it's teasing, but it's actually really harmful and traumatic for this individual. And trying to really rally around getting rid of blood quantum, and these ideas. So I think that's where I really found my voice at Haskell, and then it carried on to ASU, where I helped co-founded ASU's first public health organization. And in grad school too, where I started to really get involved politically. At some point, I just kind of was comfortable being uncomfortable, because I know getting involved in politics and being in those rooms, I was the only Native American person, the only young person, the only person of color, the only young Native woman of color. And, people were just often surprised and happy that I was there, asking these questions. So, um, I still do that in my job today where I show up in places that they probably don't expect me to be there, but just kind of letting them visual reminder that I am watching you and keeping track of what's going on here.
You talked about getting comfortable being uncomfortable. I think that's a really interesting point. Can you talk a little bit more about how that mantra, um, how you that influenced the way you got involved in things, and maybe just expand on that a little bit more?
Um, I think of, I really don't know that moment where I was just kind of like, um, not really caring what people think about me. Of course, I still that's my job as a politician is for people to like me. But that moment, I think I've really built that confidence through the leadership roles that I seeked out, to do. Um, I think what also helped was I struggled a lot with asking for help, especially in the classroom. I failed like 6 classes. Of course, I didn't ask for help. And really taking those lessons. And I think that pivotal moment, proving to myself that I can, come up from this academic hole, and really finding my passion in public health. I was at the lowest point of my academic career. At that age, I pretty much thought my life was like not going how I wanted to. And being that young, I was just like, I don't even know like what's gonna be my next step, and it was just completely, daunting. And realizing that I have this passion and I'm good at what I do, and there's so much support and there's so much need for it. And at the end of the day, it's kind of not all about me. It's about what the community needs. Our community needs these researchers. Our community needs these politicians. And I think we get intimidated when we don't see people who are not in these positions, because I never thought to be the politician. I wanted to be the policy advisor, but I didn't know I could be the policy maker until I saw like Congresswoman Sharice Davids, Congresswoman Deb Hall, or Madam Secretary Holland, win their races. And for me, I thought, oh, if I get into politics one day, it had to be tribal politics, because Kansas wouldn't accept me. But when Congresswoman Davids really shattered that glass ceiling, I was like, oh gosh, like we're accepted here. And I think a lot of us probably don't feel like we belong here. We, you know, belong back on our reservations, which is more comfortable. But I think really realizing and telling people that we need to be in these spaces, and you know, it is intimidating, because I think about when I entered in DC, there's a lot of people who it was just uncomfortable, or it just wasn't for them. They wanted to create change maybe back in their state of Nevada or Montana, or Hawaii, and it's totally fine because we do need leaders there. And I find that once I found my personality and being somewhat happy in DC, I was like, okay, like a lot of people, it's not really for them. So I think I can stick it out, and just kind of going forward with that. Um, and even in my current job, um, still talking to, so most recently, like today, our congressman that represents our district, his mobile office was in my district, and they're Republican, I'm Democrat, and they kind of really avoid the Lawrence area, so they go to Baldwin City, which is more of a Republican area. But those people are still my constituents. I always say that, like, no matter if you're R, D, or anything in between, or none at all, just really trying to build those relationships as much as possible. But I do understand the conversation of, a lot of hurtful language is out there. But I don't know, just like getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is such a self journey in itself. I think just really taking care of yourself, building that confidence in yourself that, it's gonna be okay. And I think just networking too is a big daunting thing for a lot of young students. How do you even network? I remember getting into this like policy political field, and they're just like, oh, you have to network and collect business cards and make business cards. And I remember like making my first business cards at like was it Kinko's or FedEx, and they were absolutely ugly. But I think you just keep doing it until you get better. It's just kind of one of those things. But also I'm here to help if any students are going to be watching this. I'm more than happy to help.
Thank you. I'd love to just bring you back to if you would share a little more about how scholarships and other student support you received. You've touched on struggling academically at times. How did those support systems help you get through that?
So being not academically strong is probably not as good for scholarships. So one of the great things about my internships is that most of them were paid. I believe all but one were paid, and I would just pretty much save a lot of that scholarship money to help buy books. Some of the scholarships I did get, I appreciate because they really probably looked at my essay. Because if they were going off the GPA as a filter, then I definitely was in the trash can. But in grad school, I'm so glad that I kind of got a clean, fresh start. I got to create a new GPA. My other GPA was no longer following me. So in grad school is pretty much where I got more academically blessed with financial aid. And it was great because even my tribe was probably one of my biggest supporters. And I think it's because a lot of us don't take that higher step of higher education, which is completely fine. There's a lot of fields that, a bachelor's is fine, associate's is fine, going to trade school is fine, going through the military is extremely fine. So it was that showed to me that there was a need that the tribe wanted to invest in us, and there wasn't a lot of us taking the opportunity. There's a lot of other Native organizations that helped me as well. And I think that really helped ease the burden because I think finances, and still for me, like my current job doesn't pay a lot. Anytime you can aid that financial burden, is another non-distraction where you can just really focus on your academic and studies. And I think that's probably one of the biggest ways you can help support students is through donating to organizations like American Indian College Fund, and for those to go straight to tribal students. Like I said, we don't come from a lot of us don't come from backgrounds where we have both parents. A lot of people have only one parent, or they're being raised by their grandparents. Or others are raising a children, single mothers, single fathers. So it's these scholarships help so much, and it allowed me to finish my master's degree. It also allowed me to like buy a new laptop, and for going to grad school I had a 45-minute commute there and back, so it helped pay for that oil change and those new tires. Here in Kansas we get all 4 seasons. So just even getting to school was definitely one of the biggest financial burdens for me. Snacks too, so it really helps.
Thank you very much. Could you share a little bit about, in your current role as a Kansas State legislator, what you hope to be able to do for Haskell, for the Lawrence area Native community, and Indigenous people countrywide?
So we, Representative Dr. Punkawee Victors and I passed my first bill, probably her 10th or 15th bill, missing and murdered Indigenous people, so HB 2008. It did get signed by the governor on April 7th. It will go into statute August 1st, I believe. And that is advising the Attorney General to educate our state law enforcement on missing and murdered Indigenous peoples here in the state of Kansas. It's Kansas's first step towards missing and murdered Indigenous peoples, which is so great. Other issues that people have come up to me about is changing the mascots and banning that. So I had a meeting this morning with my statewide Kansas board member for the state of Kansas and talking about, okay, what can we do with this issue? Do we need to communicate with our local school boards? I'm just, this is kind of in your guys' court, so I definitely don't want to overstep. And other issues too that impact our Indigenous community. I've seen great legislation coming from North Dakota about Native American curriculum and having that required in the K through 12 schools. So that was another conversation I had with my Kansas State board member this morning. And okay, how can we get this going? Is this something that we need to do school board by school board, or is this something we can advocate at the state level? Just really trying to bring people to the table all collectively and trying to figure out how we want to advocate. Is something that I'm learning and I'm so excited to be doing. Other issues too we have in my community are such as food insecurity. So, and mental health is definitely another issue. But I believe these issues are also collectively a state of Kansas issues. So working together with my colleagues in the state house on trying to figure out how can we eliminate or lower our food sales into food sales tax. How can we bring more suicide prevention to the schools and education to our teachers? But also great news is that here in Lawrence, we also are starting back up an Indigenous Community Center, which is really great because now we kind of have a point of contact where here in my district, in my community, a lot of people would automatically associate Haskell with like a Native American center for us, and they do not have the resource, our time, our capacity. They need to focus on their students. So it's really great to see other Indigenous leaders in my community step up and create this organization. I'm so proud to have witnessed it and so excited to help along the way. But also during my time in the State House, especially with the bill that we passed, is I got to recruit at least 5 or 6 Indigenous young women that I've worked with here in Lawrence. We're pretty much all researchers. Most of them go to KU. I think I had 1 or 2, 3 from Haskell. And this is an issue that we're all passionate about that impacts all of us, and not only in Lawrence, but when we go back to our home communities across the country. I asked if they wanted to write testimony, and they said yes. And I pretty much taught them how the process is going to go and how do we write it? Because this is a whole new format of like letterhead and like how is the language you want to do. And luckily, some of them were able to come in person when it went to the Senate side. And I got to kind of coach them and teach them, okay, this is how we're going to, you get to stand in front of the committee, which is intimidating. Here's the microphone. You say, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And just these simple things that, I think about when I didn't know. And it was really full circle moment because Representative Dr. Victors did the same thing to me in January. So now that I'm able to help kind of pass that knowledge along in just a couple months to young Indigenous women that are educated was definitely a heartfelt moment for me. And I hope to continue that on because we'll probably have internships programs, and I hope to have a Haskell student with me at least every year, every semester. So I definitely want to contribute to bringing more Indigenous peoples into the political field. Thank you so much for having me here today. I really cannot stress enough that all your donations to the American Indian College Fund go to individuals like me, but also to other successful peoples in their own right and way. At Haskell, there was always this saying where look around the room, you never know who's going to be the tribal chairman or the congresswoman or the state legislator. So it's funny how that became a reality. But if you all can, donate as much as you can, because this money and this funding really goes to a good cause and really encourages and builds more leaders, not only for today, but for the future. So thank you so much for having me here today.